college football season is drawing closer to an end, but the playoff picture is still wide open. Our District Wire sports correspondent Neil Patrick is live in the studio with more. Neil?
Thank you, Tommy. The NCAA college football playoffs is heating up. And of course, the thing that is on everyone's mind this week is rankings and how far their team will make it. I am joined today by NBC Sports Washington digital producer Troy Mocker. Thank you, Troy.
Thanks. How you doing?
Good. And so let me start off today by asking, the rankings, are obviously wide open, which means the playoffs aren't really set in stone yet. So how do you see the rankings changing over the week?
I think this week is going to be big because of all the rivalry games being played. And when you look at it, Miami, who's undefeated, who's taken the year by storm, is not in the top four. So, a lot of other teams winning and losing will impact where they are come 2 weeks for, the ACC championship and evidently the college football playoff.
And then also in terms of rankings, I know people have talked about before, there's sort of a fallacy with how teams are ranked and who makes it into the bowl games or whatnot. Do you sort of see that at all, or do you think the whole selection process is fair?
I think the selection process will never be fair. I think because of the different conferences, it's going to throw things for a loop. If you look at Central Florida, who's undefeated, they had 2 games canceled in their non-conference because of hurricanes. Their best non-conference win is against Maryland, who's okay. But because of their strength of schedule and Conference USA, they will never have the amount of games played against good teams to realistically get them in the playoff, even being undefeated. So a team like that gets almost no chance. And so you could go to an 8-team playoff and they're still going to be at the back end, because then you have to now look at a Michigan, an Ohio State, an Auburn, or Georgia. So regardless of how they decide to do the rankings, it's always going to be flawed towards the mid-major, so to speak, because they just don't play a high enough caliber of conference opponents.
Right, and you talked about the Central Florida Knights, who are a strong team. They're undefeated, and they're led by a sophomore quarterback who's been has been putting out impressive numbers this year. Do you think they'll have any shot at a playoff picture?
Probably not the playoff. They have a realistic shot at like a New Year's Day game, which is huge for that program. They've already been there once before with Blake Bortles. It goes back to the fact that they have to schedule tougher opponents, but those tougher opponents don't want to schedule them because all those teams need the playing point from a non-conference game. So the Conference USAs of the world and the American Athletic Conference are always going to be at a disadvantage because they're weighted down by a lot of not so good teams. Whereas when Alabama plays Mississippi State could not be in the top 25. Still so much a better win than Central Florida beating USF, and they're playing them this weekend. USF only has 1 loss. That game isn't as valuable as a West Virginia game is to Oklahoma or something like that.
And right now, the top 4 teams are currently Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, and Wisconsin. Which 4 teams do you think will be playing for the spot? Do you think these 4 will stay the same, or do you think it can go anyway?
I think Alabama's in. They're the best team in college football. They won't lose. Clemson is probably deserving of where they are now, but Miami is the best team in that conference. Maybe their schedule isn't as strong, but they have wins against Notre Dame. They blew out Virginia Tech. They have to avoid losing their next game, and then they'll play Clemson. So ultimately, it's going to be the winner of the ACC tournament or championship. I think Alabama, Wisconsin, if they cannot lose. They play Minnesota, tough team, but they have to win, or else the Big Ten may not get anyone because they're a couple 2-loss teams. And then it should be Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is one of the most complete teams in the country, but in the Big 12, you can lose any game, 60-58 or 73-7. Like, it's crazy out there. But they have a non-conference win against Ohio State that should really help. So I think if you look at it in terms of, it probably should be Alabama, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, and then whoever wins the ACC.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we'll go back to the Sooners, who this week won't be playing with Baker Mayfield, who won't be starting with him. With more of the media, coming down upon college football, especially during playoff season, how do you think he's handled the pressure, and do you think that the coach's decision to not start him is the correct one?
I like to see players like that. I think it's fun. I think you have to remember they're college kids. In playing sports, what's more fun than that? I think he's handled the media pretty well. He's come off and done some stuff playing the flag at the Ohio State field, but that's college. That's inherently college. Could he tone it down a bit? Yeah, sure. But I think we like that from athletes as well. I'm not particularly a big fan of suspending someone for a half. That just means so when he comes back in the game and if they're down and he leads them to a comeback, does he now help his Heisman status because he didn't play in the first half and all you have is one half of really good football? I think it doesn't really send a message. Like a lot of dudes would prefer to not play the first half and just come in and lead your team to victory. So if you're going to suspend someone, make it have an impact and not just do it because people will criticize you for not doing it. Suspend them for the whole game. Or don't suspend them. But I think suspending Baker Mayfield for half of a game doesn't really put the onus on him to change it all.
Great. And so Oklahoma this week will be playing West Virginia, Auburn, Alabama. Thank you, Troy. That's all the time we have for you today.
Yep, no problem.
A local DC nonprofit organization is changing the lives of low-income students through sports, service, and poetry. Rachel Frowney has more on that after the break.